Hey guys, happy Halloween. We're going to start our notes on 4.1. Okay, let me share my screen real quick. Excuse me. Okay, so our next assignment or unit is on radicals and square roots and roots of different powers. So we're going to start off by kind of proving this in a calculator, okay? Because I'm going to show you how to transform a root into a power. And so we're going to prove that this is the same thing. So what I want you to do is put this in your calculator. So do the square root of 9 and figure out what that is, and then do 9 to the 1/2 and figure out what that is, and you're going to show that that equals the same thing. I'm going to get my calculator. Okay, so we're actually going to do this without a calculator today, but we're just proving. So if I put the square root of 9 in my calculator, I get 3. And if I put 9 to the 1/2 power. Now, on my calculator, it stays as a power, so I don't need the parentheses. But if it shows the actual caret, you would need parentheses here, okay? So make sure that you get a 3 there. So if I enter this, I get 3, and if I enter this, I get 3. So these are the same thing. If I do the cube root, I'm going to push the math button, and then the fourth one down is the cube root. So if I do the cube root of 8, I get 2. Okay, and then if I do 8 to the 1/3, I get 2. If I do the fourth root of 16, so on this calculator, you push the 4 first, and then math, and then it's number 5 where it has an X, because it's going to put a 4 in there. And on your calculator, it might not show the 4 right there, but that's what it's going to evaluate, okay? And we get 2. And then if I do 16 to the 1/4, I also get 2, okay? So if I were going to write the square root of x, instead of, so this is my root form. If I wrote it as a rational exponent, I would have x to a power that would be a fraction. Okay, and I can convert these two forms back and forth. So if I were going to write this x to a power, looking at how we did these, what do you think that power would be? What you need to know is that when I have a square root like this, it's a square root. So there's automatically a 2 right there, okay? And then x is to the 1 power, so it's a 1 like this. So this would be a 1.5. So this number right here, this is called the index. Okay, so write that in your notes. Show where the index is, and it will show you that the index becomes the denominator. Okay, so write that down. The index becomes the denominator. Okay, so we're going to practice doing some of this. And you did this in math too. We're just going to take it a little bit further here. Okay, so this is telling us to evaluate like this. Okay, so if I'm doing 10 to the 3/2, then I first will write my radical. The index is the denominator. So this is the index right here. That's going to become the root. That goes in the little check mark. Okay, it's called the index. And then I'm going to have a 10, and then that's going to be to the 3rd power. Okay, so this is going to be 10 to the 3/2, which is the square root of 10/3. Okay, here I've got 16 to the 3/2. So in my radical, this is a 2, and then this is 16 to the 3rd. And then in my radical here, the denominator is a 5, so 5 goes into the root, and this will be to the 6th power. Okay, so now for this one, it says use a calculator to evaluate and round your answer. So this one already has, there's no way to break 10 down because 10 is 2 times 5, and there's not a pair there. So I just have to leave it. So when I put this in my calculator, I'm just going to enter this in the calculator. Okay, so 10 caret 3 divided by 2, enter. And it says to round to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to do 31.62, and that's a 2, so it's going to stay 2. On this one, I'm doing a square root. So I know that 4 times 4 is 16, and that's a pair. So that becomes the square root. So the square root of 16 is 4, and then 4 is cubed. So 4 times 4 times 4, you can put that in the calculator, you get 64. Okay, so 4 caret 3, you get 64. Okay, this one, we're doing the 5th root, which means I have to have 5 numbers the same. So notice here I have a 2 and a 2 and a 5. That is not, there's not 5 of one number, so I can't break it down. So I'm just going to enter this in the calculator. Okay, so 20 caret 6 over 5. 36.41. Okay, there's some examples of that. This is a different way of saying it. Find the indicated real nth root. So if n is 3, it's a 3rd root. So I'm going to be doing my radical is going to have a 3 in it. That means I need 3 numbers that multiply to give me the negative 216, or I need 3 numbers to break out of jail. Okay, so 216, I'm going to use my calculator. Let's see if that divides by 3. It does. So let's do 3 and 72. And 72 I know is 8 times 9. Okay, 9 is 3 times 3. 8 is 4 times 2, and 4 is 2 times 2. So we have all these numbers here, okay? So what we want to do is kind of make sure we know which ones are which. And I'm going to put a 3 in here, okay? So if I do 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3, that is the same thing as 216, okay? So these guys are in jail. I need 3 to make a pair. Now, one thing that you have to make sure of is that since this is negative, then all of these are actually going to be negative. Okay? So the cube root of 2 is of these 3 2's is just one of the 2's. Okay? And then the cube root of these is one of the 3's. Now, we have to be careful because I'm not going to multiply this negative times this negative because then I'm going to get 6. So if 6 is my cube root, then I'm saying that 6 times 6 times 6 gives us the cube root of 216. These would have to be negative to multiply to negative 216. Okay, so sometimes it's easier to not do the negative until the very end. And I would get negative 6 as our answer. Okay, so the rule is if the nth root is odd, okay, so if the nth root is odd, and the number inside is negative, then your answer is negative. Okay, and you can write that down as a note. If the nth root is odd, so this is odd, and the answer, or the inside the root is negative, then the answer is going to be negative, because I'm saying that this number times this number times this number, and these have to be the same numbers, will give me negative 216. So these would have to be negative to turn back into a negative, okay? When we do this one, we're doing a fourth root of 81. Well, I can't have a negative now because there's no way to multiply a number together 4 times and get a positive. You have to get a positive. If these were all negative, I'd still end up with a positive, okay? So I noticed that I'm doing the fourth root of 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. 4 make a set. 1, 2, 3, 4. Unfortunately, these ones die, and this guy gets to live. So the answer to that is 3. Okay. A couple more. So this is evaluating. We're not using a calculator. So here, I'm going to write this as a root. The denominator is 2, so 2 goes in the index, and then 16, and the whole thing is to the third power. So I'm going to focus on breaking down the 16. 2 and 8, 2 and 4, 2 and 2. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 2s. So let's write that. Okay, so I have 4 2s. And 2 of them make a pair. So here's a pair and here's a pair. So I'm going to write 1, 2 and 1, 2. So I get 4. Okay, and remember this whole thing is to the third power. So I have to raise that to the third power. So that means 4 times 4 times 4. So we get 64. And you could use a calculator for this part if you need to. Okay, then I've got this 32 to the negative 3/5. So I'm going to write 5, 32. Oh, you know what we need to do first? We have to make this a positive. So if the power is negative, you have to put a 1 on top. Okay, so I'm going to put a 1, and then I'm going to divide. All I do is put a 1 on top and change the power to positive, okay? So when I do this problem, I'm going to have a 1 on top. So the 5th root of 32 cubed. So 32 is 2 and 16, 2 and 8, 2 and 4, 2 and 2. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2s. That's kind of convenient, isn't it? Since it's a 5th root. Okay. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all going to cancel out. I'm going to get a 2. And then that 2 is cubed. So 2 times 2 times 2. This is going to be 1/8. Okay. All right, so pause the video and do these 4 practice problems and then come back and see if you did them right. Index is 2. We're doing the 4th root, or the 4 to the 5th power. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 to the 5th is 32. Okay, this one's negative, so I have to put a 1 over it. 1 over the square root of 9 is 1/3. Okay, here we're putting it in our calculator, so I'm not doing, it just says evaluate the expression using a calculator. So 64 caret negative 2 divided by 3. That's how you enter that in the calculator, okay? So 64 caret negative 2 divided by 3, close the parentheses, enter. So round to 2 decimal places would be 0.06. Okay, here I have to put it in the calculator, so I'm going to first change it to a power. So the 4 is the denominator. Remember, the denominator always goes in the root. Okay, and then 5 is the power. So I'm going to put 16 caret 5 divided by 4. and we get 32. Okay, just a couple more things. We're going to use the information that we just learned, and we're going to solve equations that have radicals in them, okay? So if the equation is an even root, then you're going to have two answers. Okay, let me show you why. When I take the square root of 4, I can write that as 2 times 2, and I get 4. Or I can write it as negative 2 times negative 2, and we still get positive 4, okay? So the square root of 4 in an equal sign, in an equation, is going to be positive 2 and negative 2, okay? So another way to say that is the index. If the index is even, that means it's an even square root. The index is the denominator of a rational exponent, okay? So write these two rules down, or this one and this one, however you remember that, okay? So the last thing is going to be solving these equations, okay? So I want to isolate the term that has the x in it. So this is my term I want to isolate. On this one, the x is already, it doesn't have a plus or minus next to it. So the only thing I would do is divide by 4, okay? So then I do 128 divided by 4, and we get 32. So now we have x to the 5 equals 32. And I'm going to notice that this is a 5. So to get rid of 5, I actually multiply this by 1/5. Okay, so I'm doing 32 to the 1/5 power. That's really small. So 32 to the 1/5 power is equal to x. Now, we notice that the denominator is 5, so the index is odd. So the index is odd, so only one answer. Okay, so here I'm going to do 32 to the 1/5, which is the 5th root of 32. Maybe you know what that is by now. It's 2. Okay, now I can always check this in my calculator. So I go 4, and then I do parentheses with the 2, because that's what I got for x to the 5th power. And I should get 128, because that's what I started with. And I get 128. So I checked it, it worked. Okay, all right, let's do this one. So this whole thing is to the 4th power. I don't have anything to divide or add. To get rid of this 4 power, I multiply by 1/4 in the power, okay? So I've got 21 to the 1/4 power. So when I do this in the calculator, I have to do that in the calculator because 21 doesn't have a 4th root, okay? So I'm going to do 1/4 like this. It's going to tell me 2.14, and it's just going to, we're just going to keep it at that, minus 2.14 like this, okay? So notice that the index is even. So there's going to be 2 answers. Okay, so if I multiply 2.14 by itself 4 times, I'm going to get 21. But if I multiply 2.14 by itself as a negative, I'll also get positive 21. So my 2 possibilities are the 2.14 that's positive and the negative 2.14, okay? Then I add the 3. And I add the 3 here, okay? So negative 2.14 plus 3, and we get 0.86. Okay, now you can check these, but they're going to be a little bit harder because it's a decimal, and so it's not going to be exact. It's just going to be close. So if I put 5.14 in place of x, and I type in x minus 3 to the 4th power, I should get 21 or very close to it. Okay, good. So 21. And then the other one was 0.86. I'm going to store x. And then I'm going to do the same thing, x minus 3 to the 4th power. Now, you'll notice that it's given you 21 both ways, right? So this worked for both of those solutions. So I had 2 answers. If the index is even, you have 2 answers. If the index is odd, you only have 1 answer. Okay, this is going to be really important, especially towards the end of your assignment as you're doing those problems. Okay, so I have 2 more examples of solving that you can pause the video for and make sure you're getting it, and then come back and see if you did it right. Divide by 8, I get x cubed equals, you shouldn't need the calculator for that, but you might. 64 divided by 8, and you get 8. We're doing that to the 1/3 power. So that means the cube root of 8. And I notice that this is odd, index is odd. So I only have 1 answer, which is 2. Check my answer. 2 store x, 8x cubed. 8x cubed, and we get 64, which is what it said, so we did it right. Okay, this one we're going to do 1/4 power. We notice the index is even. Okay, so I've got x plus 5 is going to equal the 4th root of 16. Okay, and the 4th root of 16, 1, 2, 3, 4 2's. Okay, so the 4th root of 16 is 2. So x plus 5 equals plus or minus 2 because the index was even. So I'm going to write that as 2 equations, positive 2 and negative 2. And then we subtract 5 and we get x equals negative 3 and x equals negative 7. Now, of course, we're going to check our answer. So negative 3 store x, and then we type x plus 5 to the 4th power, and we get 16, so that worked. And then negative 7 store x, this is going to be x plus 5 to the 4th power, and we get 16. So both of our answers checked. And if you put a little check mark by your answer like that, I'll know that you checked it, and that really helps you when you're doing these problems, to make sure that you're getting them right. Okay? All right, let me know if you have any questions, and we will see you in class.